We are back with a Fox News alert. Any moment now, President Trump is set to meet with Qatari and UAE leaders ahead of the Strait of Hormuz fully reopening this Friday.
It all comes as Israel keeps pressure on Hezbollah in Lebanon, saying terrorist operatives still pose an immediate threat to Israeli forces in the region. But the commander-in-chief is hopeful he can straighten all this out. Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst back live in Tel Aviv with the latest. Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. As President Trump attends the G7, the world is waiting for the detailed text of the Memorandum of Understanding between the United States and Iran. Senior U.S. officials said yesterday on a briefing that in the next 24 to 48 hours, the public would get to see new insight into what is actually in the agreement. One of those officials explained the deal is performance-based, meaning Iran wouldn't benefit from sanctions relief unless they adhere to their end of the deal. This means the opening of the Strait of Hormuz and entering into detailed discussions to dismantle their nuclear program. Overnight, Vice President J.D. Vance was on Hannity and explained more about how the goal is to give Iran a chance to integrate into the world economy.
The agreement says they are not getting a single dime of American money. That's just not what this is. What the agreement does say, Sean, is, again, if the Iranians behave and if there are sanctions relief and if the Iranians are integrated into the world economy, we would invite other countries, not us, but other countries to invest in their country. That's fine, but only if they comply with the terms of the agreement.
We know that the agreement calls for a ceasefire on all fronts, including Lebanon. U.S. officials say Israel will be allowed to respond if attacked by Iran-backed Hezbollah. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the fight is not over.
We saved the state of Israel from annihilation. But I tell you, citizens of Israel, the struggle is not over. We will have to continue standing guard, continue being strong and determined to defend ourselves as necessary.
With the Israelis on high alert, some here have expressed distaste with the agreement, worried it won't adequately address Iran's desire for a nuclear program. President Trump spoke upon arriving at the G7, saying this about Iran's former path to a nuclear weapon.
The main thing is that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. They fully agreed to that with strong policing powers, and they won't have a nuclear weapon, which is what it was all about, because they probably would have used it if they had it. So we had two big moments when they terminated the JCPOA, that was the Obama deal, the Barack Hussein Obama deal. And when I terminated that, it was very important because it was a road to a nuclear weapon.
As journalists, we must continue to ask difficult questions about this agreement. One of those questions is what if? What if the Iranians are unwilling to make those concessions at the negotiating table as it relates to their nuclear program?
Yeah,
guys?
It's a great question, and no doubt one that's going to come up at this G7 summit today and into tomorrow. And we are awaiting President Trump's meeting, Trey, with the Emir of Qatar. Could happen any minute now. But when it comes to Qatar, it's a complicated country to dive into and think about because they have been a great mediator in all of this, but at the same time, they were also a safe haven for top Hamas leaders for a while. So how should we view Qatar as a player in all of this?
Yeah, the Qataris played a critical role in getting this deal across the finish line. A diplomat familiar with the situation told Fox News the negotiating team from Qatar was in Tehran ultimately when this deal was reached. And they have acted as a backdoor intermediary for the United States to work on some of the finer details. I do want to give you some new information, though, that we're getting from Iran's foreign minister, who spoke from Tehran just in the last 2 hours. And he said this as it relates to the issue of Lebanon in this agreement.
And definitely any military attack by the Zionist regime against Lebanon from this point forward, as well as the continued occupation of Lebanese territory from this point forward, will be considered by us a violation of the Memorandum of Understanding.
So this is really important because the Iranian foreign minister says that any attack in Lebanon will be considered a violation of the Memorandum of Understanding. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last night indicated that the Israelis will continue to operate against Hezbollah, an Iran-backed group that is continuing to fire drones and rockets into Israel. And even U.S. officials yesterday indicated the Israelis will have the ability to respond against Hezbollah if their civilians come under attack. And so this could be a major sticking point in this agreement. Once again, the Iranians are trying to tie the situation in Lebanon to the broader agreement with the United States. Guys?
And it all begs the question, will it hold? What will hold? What happens over the course of the next week and beyond? Trey Yingst, thank you. Let's bring in former Deputy National Security Advisor and Heritage Foundation Vice President of National Security, Victoria Coates. Trey just gave a tremendous backdrop on all the facts and what is happening and the interplay behind the scenes. But President Trump is at the G7 today. He's got to sell this deal to his fellow leaders there. What does he do to sell this? How should he sell the Iran deal to the G7?
Well, good to see you, Todd and Carly. I mean, I think it's very rich to have the Iranian foreign minister talking about Lebanese sovereignty when that's exactly what Iran is violating right now. I mean, Lebanon is a sovereign country, indeed, and they are trying to reach a deal with Israel, which Iran is trying to disrupt. And so they're just being utterly illogical here in how they're approaching Lebanon. So that is a huge problem, I think, going forward. Now, in terms of selling the deal, I mean, I don't think President Trump needs to do much. The Europeans and the Japanese who are present at this G7 are all pretty desperate to get the Strait of Hormuz open. That's much more important to them than it is to us. So I think they are all very, very happy that we've reached this kind of a deal, that they're going to start to get the free flows of energy out of the Gulf on which they depend. And so I don't think he's going to have to sell it very much. I think they're just going to need to get to the point where hopefully the Europeans and the Japanese can support this thing and encourage the Iranians to be reasonable and implement it.
Yeah, and Victoria, going back to Lebanon for a minute, because there is this effort by Secretary of State Marco Rubio to get the Israelis and Lebanese governments to normalize ties, which would ultimately disarm Hezbollah. That would be the goal. But when you hear the Iranian foreign minister say something like any attack in Lebanon would be a violation of the Memorandum of Understanding, and then you have Israel saying we are not going to, we're not going to give up our ground in Lebanon. We're not going to remove troops. We're going to keep going if we are attacked. And the president also acknowledging that that is the realistic thing that would need to happen. What does the Lebanon element and the Hezbollah element mean going forward when it comes to this overall memorandum?
Well, I think the burden is going to have to be on the Iranians, Carly, to help rein in Hezbollah, because, I mean, Hezbollah is firing thousands of drones and rockets at Israel. So this isn't Israel attacking Hezbollah. This is Hezbollah attacking Israel and Israel responding. So if Iran doesn't want Hezbollah to be attacked, they have to have them stop firing at Israel. I mean, it's a very simple equation, but they don't seem to be grasping it. And, I think it is very important, though, as we look at that area, to think about how isolated Hezbollah now is. We no longer have that land bridge that Iran was using in the form of Syria to get material and money into Lebanon to finance and supply Hezbollah. That's gone. Syria is now the enemy of Iran. And then you also have, I wouldn't call it a strong government of Lebanon, but at least, something that's in Beirut that wants to deal with Israel, that wants to come to an arrangement with the Jewish state, get to a place of peace. The irritant in that is Hezbollah. So, that isolation of Hezbollah is new. It is an opportunity. So I think Israel needs to be able to defend itself. Obviously, the president has said that is their clear right, and do what they need to do to control Hezbollah. But as I said up top, that burden has to be on Iran as well if they actually want there to be some kind of peaceful resolution to this.
All this with the G7 in the background, in the foreground in our show. We've been covering it for the last hour and a half. Victoria Coates, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.